When boundaries are removed, definition becomes blurred and meaning is lost in the process. That certainly describes the culture that we live in the West today. The World Cup football is on at the moment, so let's use football as our example. In the game of football, you've got a green pitch, but outside that pitch, you've got white lines, boundary points, outside of which the ball is now out of bounds. Not only do you have the white lines on the pitch, but you also have a referee to uphold the rules of the game, to make sure that the game has been played in the right way and that whatever takes place on the park is within the boundaries of what defines the game. But what happens when you remove that white chalk line? What happens when you remove the referee? Well, instead of being confined to a very specific place, that game sprawls out across the green. Maybe outside of the green, into the stadium at large, outside the stadium, into the car park, beyond the car park, and into the city. What results is pure chaos. No one knows what's in bounds and what's out of bounds. And alongside that, you lose definition of what the game is. What defines this game anymore? What makes it the game that we love and know so well? What is the goal? What is the purpose? What are we trying to achieve here? Well, that certainly describes the culture that we live in the West today. In the West, in our generation, we have sought to remove all boundaries in pursuit of personal freedom. But when you remove boundaries, you don't create freedom. What you actually create is anxiety and a loss of meaning. In any study that's done in the area of suicide and self-harm, there are two clear drivers that mark and impose that kind of thinking upon people. It's the loss of boundaries, clear social markers that determine what is in and what is out of bounds. The loss of mores and social norms and ethics creates anxiety, which drives suicidal ideation and self-harm. It's replete throughout so much of the information that's available to us from the scientific studies of this area. But alongside that, when you lose meaning, you lose any idea of why you live. What is the purpose for my life? Why am I here? What am I doing? What's it all about? And that in turn also drives suicide and self-harm. Well, we live in a culture that is riddled with anxiety and is defined so ubiquitously with a loss of meaning. People are fearful and they don't know what makes them human. We've removed all boundaries. We've sought to remove boundaries in pursuit of freedom. Biological boundaries, ethical boundaries, norms which drive and determine who we are. Many years ago, I watched a film called The Rabbit-Proof Fence. And that's a wonderful story about Australian history where a number of Aboriginal girls are actually taken captive and they're taken to a specific convent, I think it was from memory, where they are being enculturated. They're being taught how to be good little white folk. Now, these young girls realized that they lived at one end of what's called the rabbit-proof fence, which is a fence that's built to keep out rabbits. Does what it says on the tin, right? But what these girls realized that they were now situated in this convent at one particular place on that rabbit-proof fence, and if they simply followed that fence, they would find their home. That fence that was intended as a boundary, as a barrier to keep rabbits out, to keep them on one side of that fence and to govern their behavior in terms of the pastures and the crops of the farmers of that area, that boundary suddenly became the means by which these young girls found their freedom. They escaped the convent, they found the rabbit-proof fence, and they followed that fence, that boundary, all the way to freedom. You see, we think of boundaries as inhibiting freedom in the West, but the truth is that boundaries are intended for our freedom, to help bring definition and meaning to our lives. The scripture tells us, do not remove ancient landmarks, boundaries that have been set in former generations. And that's certainly something that we should be paying heed to in our day. The boundaries are there for a reason. When you remove the boundaries, chaos and anxiety ensue. When you remove the boundaries, definition of loss is lost. We don't know who we are or what the meaning and purpose of our lives is. And therein lies so much of the trouble that we have in the Western world today. Meaning is found in the very pursuit, the very purpose for which we were made. It's found in the pursuit of God. We were created for a relationship with Him and relationship with one another. And all relationships are guarded and bounded by boundaries. Do not remove the ancient boundaries that were set in former generations. They are for your good and not for your harm. Just a thought.